Hey everybody, your average jeweler again. We've talked about diamonds before, and we've talked about the different characteristics, but I wanted to make a shorter video to just give you what I think is a more professional opinion of where to get the best value out of a diamond. That's what we're talking about today. So first things first, if you don't have an understanding, just a general understanding of what the 4 C's or the main criteria of diamond are, you really need to check out that video first, because a lot of things that I'm going to talk about here relate to those diamond characteristics, and you have to have at least a basic understanding of that to really get much out of this. So let's get right into it today. If you're liking what you see here, please hit the like button below. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. We're going to learn a lot on this channel, starting with how do you get the best value out of a diamond. So we're going to quickly go through the 4 C's, and I'm going to tell you where I think most people get the best bang for their buck. This is all relative because some people, given either their budget or their preference, may like something a little different. However, for most people, these are the criteria that they are generally happy with, and you're not going to overpay for something that you don't necessarily need. The other big qualifier before we get into this is how the stone is graded. If it has a lab report, what the lab report is, maybe even how old the lab report is, and certainly if you trust the person you're buying it from. Because there are situations where some people understand diamonds well enough where they can make it seem maybe a little nicer than it is. So find someone that you trust. I've talked in other videos about how to find a jeweler you can trust, but the criteria for judging one stone to the next is you want to be looking at the same lab report if possible. Lab reports like GIA, I always talk about being a bit more consistent. That's the Gemological Institute of America, GIA. There are other labs like AGL that do a pretty good job. EGL is the one where a lot of people look at that and say, well, you essentially have a few grades less. What does that mean? If you're looking at an EGL report versus something like a GIA report, then the GIA report looks like it's a worse stone, maybe by as much as 2 grades or so. The EGL stone could be the same diamond, but it looks better on paper. So do you want to pay more for a document, or do you want to get a good representation of what that stone is? If you're comparing a number of EGL stones, that's fine. If you start comparing those EGL stones to another report, you're going to confuse yourself. You're going to pay a little more for something that's not actually real. It's just how they graded it on paper. Keep that in mind. I prefer using GIA. Most people find it to be the most valuable opinion. So the first thing is cut. I personally value cut a lot. However, if you're trying to find value, you don't have to get an excellent cut stone. It is something I think most people will notice and gain from in the long run, but I would still encourage you to buy a very good cut if you can get it, and an excellent cut if there's a diamond available within your price point and how these other criteria work together. So try and get as much of a cut as you want. Try not to go below a very good cut if you can. And if an excellent cut presents itself within your options, I would usually lean someone towards that. The cut is important. It is a criteria where you can get more value by getting a better cut, because the weight, which you're paying for, is distributed in a way that's actually meant to be more pleasing and give you the most bang for your buck. So going right into the carat weight, so the weight of the stone, it's going to be affected by the cut, which is why I think the cut is important. The carat weight, I would factor that in almost last if we're trying to go for bang for your buck. Because if you have a specific size stone in mind, you're going to pick that size stone, and then you're going to be boxed into certain criteria given what your budget might be. If budget isn't an issue, then getting the best value stone is probably not the most important to you. But if you're trying to find the best value, I would consider all these other criteria first, and then try and get maybe the biggest stone you can. That would be my approach personally. I think you're going to get the best value that way. So getting into what I see as more of the more focused criteria for diamond, we're going to talk about color. Color's important. because most people don't perceive it to a certain point, and sometimes the color metal it's going into or the diamonds that might be around it make a big difference, because a lot of what we see in color is going to be by comparison. Everything is done on such a finite scale that when you're looking at a reasonable colored diamond, it's going to look pretty white for the most part, unless you compare it to a diamond that's even more white, or if you see it next to a diamond that's much more yellow. So if we're going by lab reports, you look at GIA's lab report, and I would usually say the best bang for your buck is kind of that GHI category. So GHI is going to give you a really good bang for your buck, because when you start to go higher in color, and by that I mean more colorless, you are paying for differences that you really are having very little difference in perceiving. Again, very finite scales. Do I think a colorless diamond looks better? Yes. Do I think most people can perceive it versus how much more you pay for it? Probably not. So I kind of would say if you're using GIA standards, I would stick with GHI. If you're using EGL, I would say maybe go another grade or two higher, because I have seen some big discrepancies there. Now the last criteria, and maybe the one that I see most people focus on, is the clarity of the stone, the inclusions, how clean it looks. And this one maybe is a bit harder, because like everything here, it can be based on a range, and there's a little bit of subjectivity to it. However, if you're using something like GIA standards, if you get yourself into the SI1 category within a grade or so, you're going to have a pretty clean stone. Most people and most stones, you could go into an SI2 and not really see too much as far as inclusions are concerned. You start getting into the VS category and the VVS category, and those, you might be paying a little bit of a premium for something that you can't see as much. Are you getting a nicer stone? Are you getting a better stone? Yes. Are you getting a better value? Not really. When you start to go the opposite direction, when we start to get into the I's, the I1, the I2 especially, and I wouldn't even touch an I3 if we're talking about engagement rings. In fact, I would only go as far as I1 if you're looking for something reasonable that's not going to have durability issues. So if you look at an I1 stone, the average person can find the inclusions in there with their naked eye. That's not to say when you're originally buying it and looking at it, you're going to see every inclusion in there, because some of them are harder to see. It is a diamond, it is small, and if you're not trained in looking for them, you might not see it right away. One thing I will bring up, I have noticed a lot of people after the fact, they'll wear their ring for a time and then they see inclusions. And while it doesn't bother everybody, most people love their ring, love their diamond. Sometimes you see something like that and it may just drive you a little crazy, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if you're looking for something that's generally eye clean, I would try and stay close to the SI1 category, with SI2 usually being pretty safe, but not always. And if you really want it to be very safely clean to the eye, I would start looking at the VS stones. I hope that helps. These are somewhat of my opinion, but I deal with this a lot. I sell a lot of engagement rings, I look at a lot of diamonds, I see the numbers, I see the prices, and I would stick with those criteria if you're trying to get bang for your buck. I hope this helps. If it did, hit the like button below. If you like learning stuff here, hit the subscribe button. We're gonna see a lot more coming up. I hope you come back and keep learning.